and it's for the Refuah Shalema of Moshe Shimon ben Leah Estechaya HaLevi. So we start off the first pasuk. The first verse is very familiar, very famous. Re'eh anochi nosin lefnechem hayom bracha u'klala. See, I present before you today a blessing and a curse. The blessing if you listen to the mitzvahs of Hashem, and the curse if you do not listen. Why does the verse begin with the word Re'eh, see? It should have simply said, I present before you today a blessing and a curse. The Or HaChaim explains that for a person to convince others to follow one path and to avoid another, he has to have tried both and seen the value of one over the other. Moshe Rabbeinu was trying to convince Klal Yisrael that only spiritual pursuits have real value. So he said to them, Re'eh, look at me. I have achieved prominence in the physical world. I have power, wealth, and kingship. And I have also tasted spiritual ecstasy when I ascended to the heavens to receive the Torah. I have experienced, therefore, the best of both the spiritual and the physical worlds, and I tell you there is nothing that compares to the spiritual blessing that one receives for observing the mitzvahs of the Torah. Moshe Rabbeinu was using himself as an example to convince the people to choose a life of Torah and mitzvahs, and that is why he begins with the word Re'eh, see. Another explanation of why the verse begins with Re'eh is that sometimes a person can be blessed with physical well-being. He is healthy, financially successful, and admired by others, and yet he is not happy with what he has. Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon, writes, a lover of money will never be satisfied with money. The sages comment, a person does not leave this world with even half of his material desires fulfilled. One who has 100 wants 200. All too frequently, physical blessing does not lead to happiness. That is why the Torah uses the word Re'eh to highlight the fact that feeling blessed is often a matter of perspective. When one focuses on Torah and mitzvahs, on fulfilling the will of Hashem, and he accepts that whatever he has in life is a gift, and he is sameach b'chalko, happy with his portion, that will bring him inner satisfaction and contentment. This could be the deeper meaning behind the statement of the sages, and you will eat your bread with satisfaction. He eats a little, and it becomes blessed inside him, says Torah's Kohanim. Satisfaction is not always a function of the quantity a person eats. The Torah promises that if we follow the path of Torah and mitzvahs, if we do not look for physical pleasures, but rather we focus on what is truly important in life, then Hashem will make us feel satisfied no matter how much we have. Re'eh, see the blessings in your life with a proper perspective, and you will appreciate them. Another explanation of what the Torah might be hinting at with the word Re'eh, that the way to acquire an appreciation for the bracha or blessing of Torah and mitzvahs is by exposing oneself to kedusha or holiness, by seeing spirituality in action. Later in the Parsha, the Torah introduces the mitzvah of Ma'aser Sheni, or the second tithe, which requires the tenth of one's produce to be separated and eaten in Yerushalayim, in Jerusalem. The verse explains that the purpose of this mitzvah is so that you will learn to fear Hashem, your God, all the days. But how does eating Ma'aser Sheni lead a person to Yiras Shamayim, to the fear of heaven? Tosfos quotes the Sifrei, which explains that when a person comes to Yerushalayim and sees the Kohanim, Levim, and Talmidei Chachamim, the Torah students around the Beis HaMikdash, the temple, and the holy city involved in spiritual pursuits, as it says, Kulam oskim b'melachas Shemayim, it has an effect on him, so that even when he returns home, he is inspired to dedicate more time and energy to Avodas Hashem, to divine service. This comment of the sages teaches a critical lesson. When a person is exposed to Kedusha, holiness, when he sees others involved in spiritual activities, it elevates him. And that perhaps is the idea the Torah is hinting to with the word Re'eh. Even if intellectually a person appreciates the value of Torah and mitzvahs, until he actually exposes himself to experiences of Kedusha, he will still find it challenging to remain focused on spiritual endeavors. The environment of a person can have a powerful influence on him. If we look for opportunities to connect to Kedusha and we associate with people who are involved in Avodas Hashem, in divine service, that can inspire us to strengthen our commitment to Torah and mitzvahs, which in turn will bring us true blessing. Now turning what we have into a blessing. So Parsha Re'eh begins with the pronouncement, Re'eh anochi nasin avnechem hayom bracha v'klala. See that I am giving you today a blessing and a curse. The next verse explains that the blessing is earned through our observance of the mitzvahs, whereas the neglect of the Torah's commands exposes us to the prospect of curse, heaven forbid. But how can we reconcile this verse with the teaching of the sages that Hashem never associates his name with evil? How can the Torah tell us that Hashem is presenting before us the possibility of klala, of curse, if he never does anything associated with ra, evil? Rav Avram Yoshua Heschel explains that this verse is telling us precisely that the outcomes of bracha, of blessing, and klala, curse, depend on us, on our decisions. Everything in our world is neutral, capable of being made into a source of great blessing, or chas v'shalom, a source of curse. Everything we are given in our lives can lead either to a bracha or a klala, depending on how we use it. Wealth can be a wonderful blessing, allowing a person to enjoy comfort and convenience, and enabling him to have a profound positive impact through philanthropy, by supporting worthy causes, for example. On the other hand, we have all seen families that have been ruined by wealth, situations where affluence has led to corruption and destroyed relationships. Another example is technology. Our devices can be a wonderful blessing if we use them the right way, to build and strengthen relationships with family and friends, to launch tzedakah campaigns, to find help when needed, and to disseminate Torah. However, as we know, technology can turn into a devastating klala, a curse, when it is used the wrong way, for shaming people, for spreading negativity, for accessing inappropriate material, and for wasting precious time. This opening verse of Parsha Re'eh is challenging us to turn everything we are given into a bracha, to use all our gifts the right way. We are to see all our assets as bearing a warning sign, alerting us to the risk of their becoming a terrible klala. It is up to us to turn everything we have into a great blessing by using our time and our resources for the constructive purposes for which Hashem gave them to us. Now, taking personal responsibility. So, Re'eh anochi nosin avnechem hayom bracha v'klala. Many commentators noted the grammatical shift in this verse as it begins in the singular form, Re'eh, as though addressing itself to each individual separately, but then immediately transitions to the plural form, Lifnechem, speaking to a group of many people. Rav Aaron Kotler explains that while the Torah was given to all Am Yisrael as a group, and we all bear the obligations of the Torah, at the same time, each of us must take personal responsibility. We cannot excuse ourselves from any given obligation based on what other people do. We must not determine our mode of dress based on the way the people around us dress. We must not allow ourselves to speak inappropriately, to use foul language, or to indulge in gossip, just because this is how other people speak. The fact that people in shul are talking to one another during davening does not make this acceptable for us. Although the Torah was given to the entire Jewish nation, Lifnechem, we must nevertheless take personal responsibility as though it was given specifically to us, as is hinted to in the word Re'eh. There is a well-documented phenomenon called the diffusion of responsibility, whereby a task assigned to a group of people is less likely to be executed than a task assigned to a single individual. When a task is given to a group, each person might assume that someone else is taking responsibility for fulfilling the mission, and so it simply never happens. It is to avoid this phenomenon that the Torah turns to each and every one of us and says Re'eh, to see the Torah as having been designated specifically to us. Our commitment must not depend on anyone else's commitment. and we cannot rely on other people to do the work instead of us. Each person must assume personal responsibility to fulfill the mitzvahs, regardless of what everyone else is doing or not doing. Now, curses or blessings in disguise. Another interpretation is that a divine curse is actually a blessing that is too great to be revealed within our limited world and must therefore be disguised as a curse. Our challenge is to see it in this perspective, rather than falling into the trap of becoming angry with God. Thus, pain and negativity exist in order to provide us with free choice. Free choice, in turn, exists in order to enable us to earn the rewards for our choices, so we need not feel unworthy of the blessings that God bestows upon us. When we recognize that evil exists solely to provide us with the free choice to reject it, our struggle with it becomes much easier. Now, the importance of every individual. So Moshe then instructed the Jewish people regarding how they must distinguish themselves from other peoples in order to remain true to their divine mission. These instructions included the laws regarding bodily mutilation and kashrus, which is permitted versus forbidden types of food. Moshe told the Jewish people, Banim atem Hashem Elokeichem, you are the children of God. In the words of the Baal Shem Tov, every Jew is as precious to God as an only son born to his parents in their old age is to them, and in fact, even more precious. God created the world for the sake of the Jewish people, meaning not only for the sake of the Jewish people as a whole, but for the sake of each individual Jew. Therefore, we should all live our lives as if the entire world were created for each of us individually and awaits our unique contributions to its destiny. In fact, the Mishnah in Sanhedrin states, Kol echad ve'echad chayiv loma bishbali nivra olam. Every person is obligated to say to himself, for my sake was the world created. Now, modern day idolatry. V'haklala im lo sishmu'u v'sartem min haderech asher anei mitzvah eschem hayom leleches achrei Elohim acherim. But the curse shall befall you if you disobey, and you turn away from the path which I command you today, following other gods which you have not known. Seemingly, the implication of this verse is that V'sartem min haderech, turning away from Torah observance, leads a person to Elohim acherim, the worship of other gods. However, empirical evidence shows us that this is not true. We all know many Jews who, unfortunately, do not observe the mitzvahs, but do not worship foreign deities, who aren't bowing down to idols or following other religions. Why then does the Torah indicate that abandoning Torah observance results in idolatry? Rav Yosef Sorotzkin explains that the Elohim Acherim, the foreign gods mentioned in this verse, can come in many different forms. There are people who worship the mighty dollar, turning the pursuit of wealth into a religion of sorts, making it their top priority and the primary goal of their lives. For others, their god might be celebrities whom they venerate. Another very common modern-day form of idolatry is movements and ideologies, subscribing to an ism of one kind or another, which a person pursues as though it's a religion. The Torah here is warning us that if we deviate from the path of Torah, if we do not follow God's plan and blueprint for life, His directions for how to live, then this will create a vacuum which will be filled through something else. If our natural religious craving is not satisfied through Torah, then we will end up finding other things, ideas, people, or movements to worship and cling to instead. And that's the end of Parsha Re'eh. We'll be back next week, God willing, with the next Parsha. Until then, have a wonderful week and have a lovely Shabbos. Kol Tuv Shalom.